everyone, if you're an existing subscriber, hello and welcome back. If you're new to my channel, hello, welcome, and why not hit subscribe now? I'm your host Alicia Vittoria Keane, and I've been interviewing inspirational people and businesses to find out how and why they inspire others. This week I interviewed Nick Dwyer about his story and the reason why he's decided to help others with his career. Here's how it went. Hello and welcome to the channel. Thank you very much for agreeing to do this. To begin with, if you could just introduce who are you and what do you do?
Okay, so my name's Nick Dwyer. Primarily my work is, I work as a psychotherapist. And before lockdown, before the corona, most of my work was talking to, I have to put it in rabbit ears, I'm afraid, talking to professionals and talking to older students, colleges, universities, and school leavers around the subject of working with child sexual abuse, which is a really heavy subject. So I do want to say to you, although that sounds like a really heavy topic, and the reasons for me getting into that is quite a heavy topic, the positivity out of it at the end of it for me is great. It's fantastic. It's a really positive kind of way of trying to teach, because I've got a different view to a lot of psychologists, psychiatrists, and other counselors that I speak to. I think my view is slightly different, which is positive, because conversation is what it's about. So we can all learn. I can learn from them, they can learn from me. You know, that's the hope.
Yeah.
So that's primarily my work.
Okay, so I'll talk to you in a bit about how you sort of got into that. But first of all, so you grew up in South London.
Yeah.
What was life like growing up in London?
In the 80s, it was, I've got to say, I loved it and I miss it drastically. However, what the media portrays, I was born in and raised in Brixton.
Okay.
And so Brixton is quite famous. For me, it's famous for its market, and it's famous for diversity. That's what it's famous for me. When I moved to Northamptonshire, what I found out it's famous for was for riots and bad situations going on, which there was a lot of bad stuff going on. But I felt completely, but once I had a child, once I had my son, it was getting a bit too much for me. And I thought, well, actually, I need my son to be able to be a child. I need him to be able to go out on his skateboard or his bike and do what he wants to do. In South London, where we was, it was getting a bit hectic. It wasn't the environment for him just to be a child and let his hair grow long and just chill out, you know? So we moved him up here. He's 27 now. So I've been up here like 26 years. And it was a fantastic move because it allowed him to be a child. He's loved it. He still sees London as this kind of bright lights and fancy stuff, which aspects of it are, but certainly not where I live.
So how did you keep your head on the straight and narrow as such to become who you are today?
Well, I think the group of friends that I had, I have to give them so much credit for it, because the reality was there was a few times where I was deciding to go the wrong way.
Okay.
And the group of friends that I was with, that I'm lucky to they're still close to me now, they wasn't having any of that. They just wasn't having it. It was kind of, you would get cursed in a really mocking way if you was trying to be anything other than, I was into free things, and it's just being as real as I can. I was into a lot of cannabis when I was young. I was into football and I was into girls. And if I had those three, I was a happy guy, you know? So we was just out for laughter, for banter. But any criminality that people around us were doing, we didn't want any part of. Yeah. And I'm really fortunate. Like I said, I've still got, they're still my closest friends now. You know, so yeah, really lucky.
Yeah, very lucky. I mean, a lot of people say the saying goes, you mix with it, you become it. Do you think
Yeah,
that played a big part on to keeping you in the straight and narrow?
100%. I totally agree with that statement. There's there was a group of, I would say, 6 or 7 of us that was very, very close, and nobody kind of came into that circle. It was that us 6 or 7 from school. And last year, because we all turned 50 on the same year, all of us went away to a trip to the Far East, and we loved it. We had a fantastic time, cursing each other as if we were still 18, 19. But there's 1 or 2 in there that are quite dominant figures, but they're dominant figures in the aspect of, it sounds really corny, but it's the truth. Love and just respect for everyone. And that's what they're about. And because they are the dominant figures within that group, we all resonate to those 2 main guys, you know. And so I've been really fortunate, really fortunate. It was really scary moving away from South London, which is all I knew. I visited up here when I was younger, like Christmas time and stuff like that, because we're family up here. But once I had my son, it's not about you anymore. It's about what's right for your child, you know. So it was just then, okay, the right thing is, because I was so close a few times to going down the wrong path, I wasn't taking that gamble with my son. And I'm not saying that it couldn't happen up here, but it hasn't. So the gamble paid off. You know, it just certainly paid off. Yeah. And he enjoys it. And now he's working, he's a happy guy, he's in a beautiful relationship. And as far as he's concerned, once he's got the money, he might be going back down to London himself. But now as a grown man, yeah. So that's fantastic, you know. Yeah, so yeah, when I look back now, I speak to the main 2 that I said about, I spoke to them both today. We speak regularly still.
So what would you say to those people who may be on the same path as what you were on, where you luckily had your friends pulling you back? What would you say to people who maybe don't have that support network?
If I'm honest, the main thing is I'm really into, as I've got older, the main thing that I'm into is honesty, transparency and honesty. And I mean, to a point that I've been writing a paper now for maybe 3.5 years on self-manipulation. Okay. And the one thing that I would say to not just young people, I would say to anyone, when you're behind closed doors on your own, how you're feeling about whatever's going on will absolutely mirror the other people that you think have got their head screwed on, and as far as they're concerned, they know what they're doing and they're happy in that life, because you're viewed the same outside. Once you go indoors and you're sitting there with regret, you're sitting there with fear, you're worried about who's knocking on your door, all of those kind of things. It's exactly the same for what's going on for the dominant ones in your group, you know. So it's just being real, it's being honest and saying, actually, I'm not about that life, that's not for me, you know. And I remember I stand up 5'6" now as a grown man. I remember as a youngster walking around Brixton as if I was some kind of big person that nobody could muck about with. When I look back now, it's embarrassing, you know. But yeah, looking back and having the conversations with my friends now, I've realized that the same fears that I had, we all carried. We all had those. And as we got older, we was able to share that with each other. But the social pressure and the worry of kind of being seen as weak, or being seen as something that doesn't fit your group, that in itself is scary. So what I would say to them is, what you're feeling behind closed doors, I am a gambling man, and I would gamble that your friends are feeling exactly the same. It just takes for one to say, this isn't for me, I'm not about this.
Brilliant bit of advice.
Yeah, it's just that honesty, you know. Yeah. So that would be my advice. I mean, when I go to, a lot of the work that I've done has been in young offenders places, and I always make jokes with them, because ego runs a lot of things, pride runs a lot of things, And I always start off by saying to them, I go in with trainers on, and I always say, I wear these so I can run. Because if somebody, I'm allergic to fighting, I come out in bruises. It's not for me. But the moment that I share that with them, yes, there will be 1 or 2 minutes of, are you serious? Is that how you see? But after that, I think once they can see that I'm no threat, especially one-on-one sessions with younger clients, nearly all of them have said the same thing. They don't want this. They don't want that horrible life, Yeah, so that in itself is sad, but most of the people that I work with, I've got to say, they realize it, and thankfully they get to a certain age and go, damn, what have I been doing? And most do, I don't want to say grow out of it, because that sounds patronizing to the younger ones. But there is a maturity or an experience that happens, I think, that makes them say, enough is enough.
I suppose it's like a moment of realization.
Yeah, it's that light bulb moment, and there's many of them along the way, But yeah, that would be my advice, is just realize that fear and that uncomfortableness that you feel, I guarantee you that your peers are feeling exactly the same once they're behind closed doors. I knew somebody who I was very close to, and out in the world, if you like, he was quite a feared character. And I'm smiling as I say it, because I love this guy dearly. And when he was out on the street, nobody would say anything to him. He was feared. But once he was in front of his nan, who helped raise him, he was a mouse. It's just that bit, the difference of when he was out on the street and the fear that he had, but then when he was indoors with nan, no. Completely different, because he knew his place in there. There were some things that he did that he's not happy with, he's not proud of. And this is somebody who really was living that life, So, but yeah, thankfully I changed character, a reformed character. Again, that realization, having children.
And it's great to hear that people can change, and they have that light bulb moment, then they can change their life. They don't have to stick with that mold. They can branch out and make themselves better. So that is really nice to hear.
I wonder whether, just sitting here talking to you now, I do wonder whether, it may sound really simplistic, but when you've got a group of friends, usually there's 1 or 2 dominant ones, and wherever they go, the rest follow, kind of idea.
Yeah.
And I do wonder whether, when there is that realization, what strength it takes to actually stand up and say, not arguing with you or anything like that, however, this isn't for me.
Mm-hmm.
The strength that would take to do. I know that at home it was, like I said, this is why I was so fortunate with my peer group. So fortunate. If it was a different group, who knows?
You had quite a strong network around you with the likes of your friends. Do you think that came from not having a strong network at home?
The network at home was chaotic. It was too chaotic. It was too chaotic. It was there was a lot of drugs involved. There was a lot of violence involved. A lot of alcohol involved. So the kind of knock-on effect of that, if you like, apart from, I gave up smoking a couple of years ago. I do this stupid vape thing to try and stop the smoking, but I don't touch alcohol.
Okay.
And the reason for that is I don't touch alcohol because alcohol, to me, there's a connection there with police and ambulance because of home life. So I suppose if people are always laughing and joking, I suppose now I would have a tipple or I might have a drink, but it's just not something I do. So home life was very chaotic, very, there was police and ambulances there on a regular basis. Yeah. So the fact that I had the peer group that I had, and it's strange because once I moved from one part of London to another, my whole world changed for the better.
Okay.
So that was from the age of, say, 11 and a half. From that point on, my life got so much better because of peer groups, because of the separation between mum and stepfather. They separated at that same time. So life got so much better at that point.
Now, you didn't have a good relationship with your stepfather at all.
No.
He wasn't a very nice man from what you've told me prior to this interview. How did you overcome that?
The overcome, and this is a really, what you've just asked for me is a really important, it's such an important question for 99.9% of people out there that have suffered any form of abuse, whether it be psychological, physical, mental, sexual. The word overcome, my short non-political answer is I haven't. And I don't think people do. I think that's a myth. What I think is, as time goes on, because there's the old quote, right? That time's a healer. I think that's a nonsense and nonsensical statement. I think as time goes on, you have other coping mechanisms, other coping strategies, and we rewire to understand what's happened, to overcome it, there's an acceptance of it, of course, because it happened. However, to say overcome it sounds to me like you've put it down. You don't know if that's ever truly possible. And that sounds really negative. The issue with that for me is working as a psychotherapist. I think we would be setting people up to fail. If we say you can overcome that, I think we're setting people up to fail, because when they don't, they themselves feel like a failure because they haven't overcome it. The reality is we don't. We learn to live with it. We kind of gauge our life in a different way. We have an understanding of what's happened. But to overcome, I'm not sure that word fits. For me, I'm not sure.
I completely get that. And that's kind of what I was after when I asked you the question as well. That was like, I wanted your view on that. So you mentioned their acceptance, and you also told me prior to this that you were unfortunately sexually abused when you were younger. How do you learn to accept that?
See, it's a beautiful question, but I have to. Now I'm going to be a bit of a politician, and I apologize for this, right?
No, go for it.
Can you give me your idea of what you mean by acceptance?
Like you say, learning to almost accept what's happened and put it to one side, rewire your brain.
Okay, so it's really it's kind of really practical what I'm saying, and there's almost an emotion taken out of this at this point, what I'm saying, from my perspective, and it's this. Sorry if I sound patronizing, because I don't mean it in this way.
No, not at all.
You and I are having a conversation now.
Mm-hmm.
I accept that we are, because it's happening. That happened. The sexual abuse happened. So I accept it from the practical sense of that happened. That, aside from that, when we say acceptance, that's all there is to acceptance for me, is really understanding that happened. Now, what you do with that and how you moved on. So I'm trying to be as positive as I can with that. So I've had, where I'm now teaching others about working with people who have been abused. I'm passionate about that, but I'm also passionate that we're getting it wrong in this country. We're seriously getting this work wrong. And I don't know the cure to it. And I'm not going to be arrogant enough to say that I do know the cure to it. But I know that some of what we're doing is wrong. But let me not avoid for the minute. How have I accepted? So I've accepted because I know that it went on. Now, here's some of the difficulty with me being as honest as I try to be. I lost sleep over the fact that I didn't lose sleep over it.
Okay.
It's a bit to get your head around.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that for me, when I was young, shows my age, there was no internet, no mobile phones, anything like that. When I left school, because I stayed on, and when I left school at 16, 17, we had one computer that just arrived into the school. And unfortunately, I was the type of character that certainly wasn't allowed anywhere near that piece of equipment because, yeah, it would have got broken at least. So for me, I had to go to the library.
Okay.
So I was going to libraries and I was doing my own studying on this sexual abuse that happened to me as a child. Now, the manipulation that's involved in that, that's a key topic of what needs to be taught to young people or people that have had this done to them. I don't absolutely that's gone on then. I'm no longer a victim of that. So the victim title was gone, as far as I'm concerned. Yes, it happened to me when I was younger. I'm not carrying that title on anymore. The other part of that is, for a lot of years, and I'm still fighting with that, I continued to, in many different ways, when we say self-harm, there's thousands of ways of self-harming, right? So I self-harmed in so many ways because I didn't truly understand that it wasn't my fault until, let's say, early 30s.
Okay.
So it took that long for me to realize this genuinely had nothing to do with me. But that's how long it took. So again, unfortunately, what happens is children are put into a system of therapy of some sort. Now, from the get-go, there's an issue. So I'll give you one example. And this is the example I'll give because it's a really kind of powerful one. I was asked to work with a young person. Now, I deliberately wouldn't work with anyone under the age of 18. It was kind of a blanket cover for me. I wouldn't do it. 2 local organizations and a doctor had got in touch with me and asked me to work with this particular person. And I said, because of the age, I'm not doing it. About 2 months later, they contacted me again and said, he's desperate for help. My conscience, everything got to me. Damn. I effed and blind at the agencies and I effed and blind at the doctor. And I said, don't any of you call me again, but I'll work with this young person. Now, one of the first things you have to do is tell them the boundaries of confidentiality, the limits of confidentiality. So, if a child tells me that they've been abused in any way, by law, I need to go and tell authorities. Now, I understand that and I respect that because for me, the first priority is let's protect our kids. That's the first thing. That's number one. Let's make sure our babies are fine. However, there's an issue with that. And the issue is most children have been manipulated to such a way and they understand. If I now tell this person and they tell the authorities, there's going to be a huge mushroom cloud now. And it's all because, as far as children are concerned, it's all because I've opened my mouth. Mm-hmm. So if he has to say something, I won't say anything. And it worked. The statistics on that, I haven't got the exact statistics, but the guesstimate is an extremely high amount of young people that go into therapy that never disclose this. And they don't disclose because they know that if it is a family member or a friend of the family, they know the police, the authorities are going to get involved immediately, which of course I agree with. Mm-hmm. But for the child, that's devastating because they've now opened their mouth. Yeah. And that's the problem with this. So that's why I say that for me, a lot of the system needs looking at. It needs to be addressed. And I don't know how. That's the problem. I'm saying there's a problem, but I don't have the solution. I don't know how to get around it.
It's a real difficult one, isn't it? A real difficult one. I just want to pick out on the point there about blaming yourself. Mm-hmm. Why do you think it is the case, more of the case of self-blame, opposed to hating the abuser? Or
the manipulation is such a clever, it's unbelievably, and it's unbelievably clever. If I give you, so I'll give you the idea of what happened to me. So my abuse started when I was about 5 and a half. I'm not going to go into details of the abuse, of course not, but I'll tell you about the manipulation. Now that I look back and I go, bloody hell, what a clever so-and-so. So at 5 and a half, because you have to remember, these people don't only manipulate the victim who they're abusing, they have to also manipulate the family around that victim. And in a lot of cases, there's a lot more manipulation going on for the family, that they manipulate the family. So to give you an idea, the guy that abused me, he was quite a wealthy guy, and he'd latched onto my family, which was in chaos, of course it doesn't have to be, but it was in chaos. And he opened like a cafe, and he gave my mum a job at the cafe. And he lived and I lived maybe 200 yards from my primary school. So what he did was he basically said to my family, look, I need that cafe open until 11, half 11 at night. But don't worry, I'll babysit. So fantastic, he's given me a job, he's going to be a babysitter for my son, that's fine. My stepfather at the time was working nights, he was working through the night, so I stayed with him, get up in the morning and go straight to school. So what he done was he let me smoke cigarettes at 5 and a half and drink whiskey, because now we've got a secret, right? Mm-hmm. Now I already know that my stepfather is a violent man. I've seen violence. I've experienced violence from him. So now we've got a secret. I need him to keep this secret. Otherwise I'll get beatings from my stepfather. So now we've got a secret. There you go. The next stage was maybe about six months in. He started to explain to me that my family were liars. What do you mean? So I said, well, Father Christmas is not real. So what? So obviously, I've asked other adults, begged them to tell me the truth, found out Father Christmas is not real. So now, he's not only keeping a secret for me, but my family lie. Now, whether I like it or not, this is the issue. Whether you like it or not, if you're in a house of violence and drugs, or I can stay up late, I'm smoking cigarettes like an adult at 6 years old. Maybe that's why I'm 5'6", by the way. Maybe that's why I'm so short, because I started smoking so young. But the choice, I have watched mum get beaten, or I stay there and tolerate that. So the manipulation level is huge. And it's not a popular thing what I'm going to say. I detest what this guy done. And when I went to the police, when I was living up here. I was up here when I went to the police. But this was way before the Jimmy Savile stuff. So when I actually went to the police, what they said to me was I would have to take out a private case. I would have to find him myself and take him to court myself, because it was so long ago. Now, obviously, with everything that's gone on, I would imagine that they would jump on it. But my perpetrator has since, he's dead, long dead. He's gone. So the manipulation level is so big that your brain does need rewiring. It does need rewiring. You need to understand, and you need to come to that realization. I've heard many people say, I know it wasn't my fault. And then 3-4 years later, really understand that it wasn't their fault. And it's coming to that point that for me is the key thing. If you and I was walking down the road and we got mugged, we would go straight to the police and we would say something. We wouldn't care who we told. Yes, it'd be slightly embarrassing, but it would be petrified. We got mugged. When it comes to that, there's a lot of shame involved in that. And because of the shame, a lot of people keep it to themselves. which is why I did until, I'll be honest with you, until thousands of pounds worth of therapy made me realize it wasn't my fault. But it's the, all that sounds really gloomy, but it needs to be expressed in that way so that young people, if they hear it, realize the manipulation is it's sophisticated, whether we like it or not. It's a real sophisticated, because you have to think they're doing what they're doing and they have to put everything in place to not get caught. So the manipulation levels are extreme. But what I was going to say was, and this isn't a popular thing, I have massive hatred for what he did. Him as a human being, I don't believe that he even gave it a second thought about the long-term harm. That wasn't in his head. His was self-gratification right there and then. And that was it. And I'm not letting him off the hook. He introduced me to his abuser.
Okay.
And basically pointed at this guy and said, and then pointed at me and said, have you seen what you've made me? I'll put a bleep in there myself. Do. Because as far as he was concerned, because it happened to him, and again, it's another thing that we're teaching in a really, we're teaching wrong. We're teaching our therapists, we're teaching people wrong. When I was young and I was doing my own studies, the statistics were as high as, it was late 70% that the books used to say, if you was abused, you would go on to abuse. 70%.
That's really high. Really high.
So thankfully, if anyone cares to have a look on the British Journal of Psychiatry, for me, that's my place to go. If I want to go and study anything factual, if I want to go and look at statistics, if I want to go look at things like this, they, for me, are top drawer. I've looked at the American sites, our sites, Australian sites. British Journal for Psychiatry is perfect, in my opinion. And when you look at their statistics, what they say is any of the statistics around child sexual abuse, we have to really be very careful, and these are my words now, take with a pinch of salt. And the reason being is, let's say, for example, person A over here gets caught abusing a child. When they go to court, one of the things that they will say is, because it's mitigating circumstances, it happened to me when I was a kid. That then goes on the cycle of, with no proof, by the way, that then goes on as part of the cycle of abuse statistics. So the other issue is, unfortunately, we know that they're the most manipulative, the perpetrators of this, the pedophiles of this, are the most manipulative group on the planet. We know this. And yet, unfortunately, a lot of so-called experts have taken their testimony once they've been caught, and they print these testimonies as fact. Well, because they've been caught doesn't stop them from being manipulative. So why is it we know they're manipulative and yet we take on what they're saying as fact and teach that to other people as to what's going on? So the manipulation for kids is, if there was a way of children understanding, which I don't expect them to, don't get me wrong, but if there was a way of our children understanding, I'm being tricked here. This person is rewiring this. If there was a way of them understanding it, that'd be a great start to help, a real great start, because the threats or anything that goes with it. See, you've got me on a roll. I apologize. I'm going to explain one more thing really quickly.
No, go for it.
A lot of people don't understand, and especially youngsters, don't understand the difference between a contradiction and a paradox. Now, because they don't understand the difference, that in itself, in these situations, makes the situation almost impossible to get to. Let's say, for example, a little child is being abused by, and I'm sorry to anyone out there, I might be one myself, saying granddad. Yeah? Okay. 99.9 of us, like my granddad, we love them dearly, they're beautiful people. But let's say that this young person here is getting manipulated or abused by a granddad. The child becomes seriously confused because of what they perceive as a contradiction. I love this guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of the father figure of the whole family, and he's doing this. Contradiction.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, everybody else loves him, but I hate him for what he's doing to me. So if I now say something as a child, I cause all this trouble for this big father figure in the house. Now, paradox is when that young child can say, I'm having this done to me, and I hate what he's doing, and he's my granddad and I love him. And that becomes one whole truth. It's horrible what's happening, and granddad needs to go to prison, of course. But the fact is, I love this guy, and he's doing this. That's a paradox. It's where it becomes one truth rather than separating it, and then there's a fight going on for these youngsters. It's a really difficult one, you know? And it's something that I didn't learn until I was at uni from one of my professors. And once I learned that, I was like, whoa, hang on a minute. This makes sense. Say, for example, and if she watches this, she'll laugh. I love my mum. She walks on water as far as I'm concerned. She's my heroine. She's my queen, this woman. And bloody hell does she get on my nerves. Do you know what I mean? So, and that's the paradox. But that's one whole truth. She gets on my nerves, and I love her dearly. And it's okay. It's not, I love her, but she's really getting on my nerves. So I don't know what to do about this now. Because now there's confusion. Well, no, it's just one whole truth.
You then went on to study all like the psychology.
Psychotherapy, yeah.
Behind the therapy. Do you think part of that wanting to study was to help others, or was it to help yourself?
It was a really strange one. It was almost like I'd become one of those people when I was younger at the bus stop where everyone used to come up and just start talking. And I kind of couldn't get my head around it. And then I had, in my friendship group, I had people come in to confide. And I didn't know what to do with this information. I didn't know how to respond. I certainly would never give anyone advice because my own life is a mess in some areas. So there's no way I'm going to tell anybody else how they should live. And I genuinely didn't know how to respond to them. So I was thinking about that, and I was driving at the time for a living. And I said to my boss, I'm going to go part-time. I'm going to start studying this. And it was a 10-week course, the first one I had done. I thought, let me just go to this 10-week night school and see what happens. And I just fell in love with it. Absolutely fell in love with it. It just, I don't know whether you've ever been anywhere and you just felt like you was at home. It just felt like you belonged there. And it was, which was really strange because it was full of nurses, professionals. And I'm a driver from London, speaking how I speak, and all of these people are talking beautifully. And I just felt like I belonged there. So within that 10 weeks, the guy that was teaching, he pulled me aside basically and said, look, I want you to go on to the next one, but I want to give you a bit of work. And I was asked to go in and do some observation work. Okay. This was a 10-week course, so it was under his supervision, but perfect. Loved it. So I'd done 4 or 5 years through the college. And then I was allowed, I was almost let loose to go and work with clients. And I thought, there's no way I'm ready. No way. So I went on to Warwick Uni. And I went to Warwick Uni, if I'm honest, I chose there because the professor that was there, these are the books that I kind of resonated with, that made sense to me. So I phoned the university and it was him that picked up the phone. So I was almost starstruck, you know, I was almost like, oh, is that? And yeah, I went on to uni at Warwick and loved it, never looked back. I went on to teach for a little while. Teaching was great in the classroom, but the politics behind the scenes in schools and colleges, not for me. So it's a step away. But yeah, the psychotherapy for me, I've victims. They were the last people that I would work with.
Okay. And what was the reason for that?
Because it's almost like if I experience something bad and then I come to you and say, this is exactly how you're going to feel when this happens, that for me is not only arrogant and rude, but it's desperately wrong. I can't tell you how you're going to feel about that. We will experience that so different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was very aware that I didn't want to work with clients who had experienced similar to me and then say, I know how you feel. And I was afraid that I wasn't strong enough not to be able to do that. So I said, I'm not going to do that. But as is, I have worked with some. I've also worked with paedophiles in prisons. That's an experience. That's an experience. When these paedophiles are saying to you, can you please ask the courts not to let me out of here? Because I'll do it again and I don't want to hurt children. That's an experience. And then because of finances, the courts say, he's served his time, he needs to go. You know, so it's a difficult one.
How do you find working with paedophiles in prison when you've been on the bad end of the situation? It's not like someone walking in who has nothing.
How do I feel about it? I think the fact that the one that I've only worked with a few, but the few that I've worked with have asked to work with a therapist because they don't want to continue what they're doing. Now, I go back to that first 10-week course. There was 32 of us in the class and three guys, me and 2 other guys in that class. All the rest were female. We got to the end of the 10 week and this question was asked. And the other 2 gents basically said, I need to leave, because I would drag the person over the desk and beat them. I couldn't not do that. And I understand that. I get that. For me, that doesn't help children. You'll give them a black eye and a bloody nose and you might feel better for 10 minutes. I get that. But what have you done to help a potential victim to stop that from happening again? You know? So I've always tried to look at it that, thankfully, I've got to say, I don't do much of that work.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's hard going. That's very hard going. But the bottom line is, if I could talk to somebody with the hope that they could not do it again, then of course I'll do everything in my power to help that situation. You know, I don't know. I haven't worked with a perpetrator for years now. For years, and it's not something I'm rushing into.
Mm-hmm.
My bit is, unfortunately, I think our system again has been so focused on what causes paedophiles to do what they do, and we're still in the same situation. In fact, it seems to be getting worse. So for me, my idea is, let's work with young people to really let them know if this is manipulation. This is what manipulation's like. So if you experience any of this, we assure you we're there for you every time. Because the one thing that young people need to understand is, it's that level of, it's not your fault. It genuinely has nothing to do with you. I remember speaking to one, I'm being careful about how I word this, but I remember speaking to one young lady who, she was 18, 19 at the time. And she had been sexually abused when she was 13, and she blamed herself for being inappropriately dressed. Now, you and I will shake our heads and say, how ridiculous is that? However, that's whereas me and her sat together and we was talking, and I said, it's the obvious thing to do, I know, But I kind of said, okay, you've got a child crawling around but naked. Is it the child's fault if somebody abuses? No. Okay, 2 years old, 3, 4, and so on. At what age is it? Because of course, up to 100 years old, it's not that person's fault.
Right.
You know, but it took such a simple conversation for this beautiful human being to kind of burst into tears and say, why has nobody ever said this to me? Because of the trickery that goes on. Now, thankfully, she, from my understanding, she's going on to do the work that I'm doing. And that, if I never achieved anything else, the fact that that person's out there carrying on that work, I've won. No, but it's true. I remember, I'm not one of these people say, if I can just help one person's not enough. I want to help millions if I can. One's not enough. I want to help as many as I can, because babies are babies, kids are kids, you know, and we've been concentrating far too long on what makes a paedophile tick. They deserve no more of our attention in that area. What needs to happen is our focus needs to go to our babies and our kids and say to our kids, this is manipulation. This you don't have to tolerate. And that for me is where my focus would be. How we go about doing that, I'm not the brains of Britain, but this, I understand. This stuff is the one area that I'm quite confident in.
I don't think it's spoken about enough.
No, I don't think it is. And the reality is, as vile a subject as it is, and as horrible as a subject as it is, that's part of the reason why it's not spoken about, which is part of the reason why our babies are still suffering this nonsense. Yeah. You know, this needs to be something that is just, expressed to our kids and expressed to everyone, not only our kids, but people who, say, for example, I said to you, my son's 27. He's my everything, my son. He's everything to me. And when I started to do this work, when I was quite a while ago now, in my 30s I was, but when I spoke to, and I expressed to him what happened to me when I was a child, and that was the first time I'd expressed, and he went, and I thought, oh no, what? And he said, that's why I never had a sleepover. And I never allowed him to stay with other people. I allowed children to stay with us because I knew that they were safe, but there was no way I was letting him stay away, which of course broke my heart that he never experienced that. But it's kind of, it's something that I never even considered, you know? So if people think that it doesn't have a lasting effect, because my son has now experienced, well, not experienced, causing chaos in other people's homes, you know? He's missed out on that stuff, which is a shame, but he's a good guy. He's a good guy.
You seem like you're very close with your son, and prior to this interview, you also did say life is now good, life looks good for you. Can you just give us an oversight on what life looks like for you now?
My therapy, I'm picking up again in quite a big way. That's really important to me, therapy. It's the one, I was an absolute toe rag at school. The teachers loved me because I was kind of a cheeky chappy. I never was disrespectful, but I certainly never did any work. And that's when I was there. My learning started after school. Once I left school, I started to learn. Now I have a partner who challenges me so much in a real positive way. I think because of the negativity from the abuse, it challenges but it helps me to grow. So the relationship I'm in I'm a fortunate guy. I think don't get me wrong, I won't say no to the lottery, but I do feel sometimes I've won it already with her, and that's genuine, I really do. My son, if he wasn't my son, he'd be my best friend. He's just, but I put that down to me. I don't put that down to his mum. That's down to me, that bit. And to be honest with you, getting back into the therapy is great. As you know, we spoke offline before. The guy that I'm working with, he's a friend of mine from he's been about 16 years old. So working for him is challenging, but I'm kind of dealing with some of the social media messages that come through when people are struggling.
Okay.
So he's kind of hired me, if you like, to do that part. Because fair play to him, he said he's not qualified and he might say the wrong thing. Because I'm qualified, it doesn't mean that I won't, but I do my utmost. So yeah, life's just it's a lot more relaxing now. And if my only frustration is I want to get this word out there. As far as I'm concerned, every young person I've spoken to about this, when I've worked one-on-one with younger people, they're shocked at how much them and I can relate. Now, unfortunately, when you look at the way that the government's got the health system set up for victims of abuse, it has to fit into certain boxes, and life doesn't work like that, especially with victims of abuse. It does not work like that. It can't. It's just impossible. So the fact that, well, you have to fit, which box do I tick? Well, none of those apply. So the fact that I can sit there and have that conversation with a young person and say, you haven't got to tick any boxes here. How are you? What did you think? But it's that I'm still sat with slightly the term of overcoming it. I'm still sitting there with that, because I think people have to understand that this is something that you learn to live with.
Yeah.
Overcoming it, and that's the thing. If I felt I have to overcome it, I'd be sitting here now thinking I'm a failure. And the reality is, I'm trying to. Don't want to sound like an American pom-pom cheerleading kind of person, but it's almost like I'm trying to turn that negative stuff, and I'm trying to take my experience of that and say, as many of these young people that I can help, or an adult who is a survivor, or an adult, if I can work with them and they can say, and have that light bulb moment for themselves during that work, then we're winning. We need to, yeah. That's so life's great for that. Yeah, I'm in a job that I like, a relationship where I'm not the boss, but I love the relationship, and a son who is my everything. Life's good.
That's lovely to hear. Lovely to hear that life's good.
Yeah.
Finally, I do have 10 very quick questions.
Okay.
So these are very light-hearted.
Fantastic. Go for it.
So, are you ready?
I'm ready. Go for it.
Cool. One goal that you want to achieve?
Help. Just help people.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Second question, your favourite biscuit?
Hobnobs, chocolate, and they're so bad for me, but those, yeah, my belly button's getting far too big eating those damn things, but yeah, hobnobs, chocolate hobnobs.
And you can't just have one of them either, can you? It's
no.
A whole pack or nothing.
Exactly. Oh, good. A woman after my own heart.
Next question, would you rather be a fly or an ant?
Fly.
Okay.
And I have no idea why. I think maybe because I'm slightly claustrophobic and I don't want to be an ant going underground and in those ants. That's all that's come to my mind. I'll be a fly.
Okay.
Yeah, I can annoy as many people. Yeah, I can annoy more people. I'll fly.
When you're not helping others, what are you doing?
Music. 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 I listen to as much music as I can, and really poorly, please don't ask me to demonstrate, I'm learning to play the clarinet.
Okay.
But it does sound like I'm hurting a cat at the moment. I will get better. It will happen. Yeah.
You'll have to send me like a little voice note if you play so I can edit it in.
Oh, listen, I say about being truthful, but that won't be me playing, the one that I send you. Yeah.
Next question. What's your favourite all-time dinner?
It's a West Indian dish called brown chicken. It's like a chicken stew.
Okay.
Oh, it's stunning. Oh, it's stunning. Oh, it's making my mouth water now, actually. I haven't had that for years. But yeah, it's called, I suppose if you go to a decent Caribbean, I'm not talking about the chain Caribbean shops, but if you go to a decent Caribbean shop or an older generation of the Caribbean community, chicken stew. Oh, yes, that's the one.
Might have to have a look at that. How do you find answering such a high number of social media messages for someone else?
It's thankfully, I was finding it a bit overwhelming for a while, but thankfully, I mean, it is so busy that I've now got another member of the team helping me. So yeah, that's taking the edge off because it's basically a full-time job. It's a full-time job because everybody deserves an answer, even if it's just, hi, how you doing? To just ignore them, I can't do it. I just find it arrogant and rude. Mm-hmm. So even if it's, hope you're fine, hope you're well, or something like that, you know.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah. If you could meet any celebrity, who would you want to meet?
Alive or dead from the past, or alive or dead? Celebrity. There's quite a few. I've got to say Sade, the singer Sade. Only because I've got a massive crush on her and I would idiot myself in front of her. Yeah, Sade. Yeah, Sade. But behind it would be Mahatma Gandhi first, but then if not, Sade. Yeah. A huge crush on that woman, yeah.
Next question. Would you rather have hands for feet or feet for hands?
Hands for feet.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because when I was younger, I used to do breakdancing. Mm-hmm. So I was walking on my hands most of the time anyway, so I could tolerate that.
Okay.
So I have my hands on my feet. If I had to have it that way around, yeah, it would be that. That's such a strange question, but I'm sticking with that. Okay,
so next complete random question. Would you rather have ears for a nose or nose for ears?
It's got to be nose for ears. It's got to be nose for ears. Yeah, I'll go for that. My ears are a bit big. I don't want that plastered on the front of my face. Yeah, I'll go for that.
Told you they're random. And final question, what's your favourite, sweet or savoury?
The Mars bar sweet. That's it. Yeah, I've been a fan of them for far too long, and I won't show you my teeth because it will testify to it.
Well, you'll be glad to know that's the end of my 10 quick questions.
Cool.
Thank you very much for taking part. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I know it's heavy, but I hope that for the people that do see it, I hope that they realise that there's some serious positivity that's to come from this. You know.